chapter 2. I hope that you're following along with us in our summer reading plan as we get an up-close and action-packed look at Jesus' life according to the Gospel of Mark. And if you haven't started yet, it's not too late to catch up. We're only on chapter 2. It's only the second week. So join us if you haven't started. I think it'll be really beneficial for your walk with Jesus, and it will help you during our small group times coming up throughout the summer. The first of which is this Wednesday night here at the church at 6 p.m. So we'd love to have you here for that. But chapter 2 of Mark opens with this beautiful account of a healing done by Jesus. And so back in chapter 1, we saw that the fame and the word about Jesus was starting to spread all throughout the area. And even though Jesus said, don't tell anyone to those he healed, it was hard to keep something as amazing as him quiet. And so we enter here in chapter 2 with a house that is packed full of people. Like, this house is so full, no one can get in. And so arriving to this house are 4 friends with their friend who is paralyzed. And they can't even get in the house. Imagine they tried and were pushed out, and they had this man that they're dragging on a mat. And so one of them has an idea. And they take this man and they hoist him up on the roof. And once they get up on the roof, they start tearing through the roof. Now, this was probably a thatch roof made out of hay, made out of straw. And so they start tearing through it. And this was likely Peter's mother's house, who we met in chapter 1. But these men did not care. And they start digging through the roof of this house and lowering their friend in front of Jesus. And look what happens in verse 5. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now, this upset the religious people in the room because Jesus just claimed that he could forgive sins, which only God could do. But not only did Jesus claim to forgive sins and claim to be God, he proved he had the power to do it. Just look at verses 11 and 12. I say to you, rise up, pick up your bed and go home. And he, the paralytic man, rose immediately, there's that word again, and picked up his bed and went out before them all, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, we never saw anything like this. No one had ever seen the things that Jesus had done before. And we see in these verses a picture of 4 friends who will do anything to get their friend to Jesus. And I think that that's really important for us. These men were willing to risk a potential lawsuit. They were willing to destroy someone's house. They were willing to be judged. They were willing to do anything they had to do just to get their friend in front of Jesus so that he could meet them and maybe be healed by him. And I think that is important because if they're willing to do that for physical healing, shouldn't we be willing to do that for our friends for an eternal and spiritual healing? Are you willing to do anything to get your friends to Jesus? Risk judgment, risk denial, risk even being made fun of to get your friends to Jesus. Jesus sees that faith. He appreciates that faith and he rewards that faith. Do you have that kind of faith in him to save your friends that you love? Follow the example of these men in this story and get your friends to Jesus and have their sins forgiven by him, just like this man was in this story. But in this story, we see that the religious people were upset. And this would not be the last time that they're upset with Jesus, not just in this chapter. In fact, 3 more times in this chapter, they get upset with Jesus for the Sabbath, for fasting, but they really get upset because of who Jesus is spending his time with. In this chapter, we see another disciple follow Jesus. His name is Levi. He is a tax collector, which means he kind of stole money from the people in the town. And they didn't like him. He was an outcast. He hung out with sinners. And Jesus calls him as a disciple. And not only does Jesus call him as a disciple, Jesus spends time with him and his friends. He eats dinner with them. He gives them the time of day. He loves on them. And this upset the Pharisees. And they said, why is he spending time with these types of people? What's wrong with him? Doesn't he know that they're dirty, they're unclean, they're lost? And Jesus has one of the best replies. We read, those who are well do not need a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. Man, we see Jesus' heart in these verses. Jesus is here for sinners like you and me. If you're broken, if you're lost, if you've messed up, if you've sinned, Jesus is here for you. And if you are saved, you should be going to the lost as well, just like Jesus. Even if people judge you, even if people think you're crazy, even if people think it's wrong, we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the broken and the sinners of this world. Just like we take our friends to Jesus. If our friend's a sinner, take him to Jesus. Even if he's not your friend, if you find a sinner, take them to Jesus, because that's who Jesus came for. If you're broken, if you're hurting, if you know someone who's broken, who's hurting, who's sinned, who's messed up, bring them to Jesus. We see all of this in Mark chapter 2. As Jesus is beginning his ministry, his fame is spreading, he's doing more and more miracles, he's making the Pharisees and the religious people mad at him, but he's demonstrating God's heart for broken people like you and me. Keep following along in the reading plan to see what happens next.